I'd first like to get to know a little bit about the both of you, how you got involved in this topic, and your background. Chad, let's start off with you.
Well, I am an experiencer, and I'm also a engineering technologist, mechanical. Um, I figured out, I discovered by shock that I was having experiences when about 19 or 20 years old. And then about 10 years ago, I started going to MUFON conferences. And Kathleen Martin, who was the leader of the Experiencer research team at the time, after getting to know her for two conferences in a row, she convinced me to join MUFON. And so I was working with them, volunteering with them for quite some time. And then I started writing a book, which expanded and turned into two books. And so I've been on a leave of absence for the last couple of years writing these books.
And Dave, what about yourself?
Well, I'm also an engineer of sorts. I'm an electronic and electrical senior engineer and technologist. And I met Chad about, well, like you said, when he started hooking up to MUFON, because I was also in MUFON Canada. I've been in MUFON Canada for 15 years. I'm the National Director Emeritus. I ran it for 4 years during COVID. That was pretty tough. And so I met Chad when he joined and got to know him very well. In fact, is on our MUFON team, I appointed him as our experienced research team manager because he had a great rapport with people who were trying to report their experiences. So we teamed up on a number of issues. One is a software program that we're developing, but more so, we're just so fascinating by UAPs and what we can discover. And I travel the world. It's called the Center for the Scientific Study of Atmospheric Anomalies, or CSA, CSSAA for short. And it was Chad one day called me up and said, I think I see something funny behind a UAP in a video. And sure enough, for the first time ever, I froze the video and started looking. And I said, Chad, you're absolutely right. Figured out what it is. And he went off and went way into it with me encouraging him and helping him do some of the research and stuff. But basically, Chad is the one who came up with the actual final response. And that's why we published the book. And so we've known each other for more than 10 years.
With all the things that you've mentioned, all the things that you are already alluding to, I have a lot of questions, as you can probably guess. But I'm aware that you prepared a presentation that I think might answer a lot of my questions. So I'm ready when you are on this.
Go for it, Chad.
So to start out with, we had watched a video. It was the UAP over Colombia. It was a Saturn-shaped craft, and we noticed the background clouds were moving. And that's when we realized there was gravitational lensing going. But I started writing a document for the MUFON journal, and it's not something easily found. So we're not the first to say UAPs will create gravitational lensing. I believe Kenneth Knuth was the first one in a presentation in 2021 to show this very gravitational lensing in the Aguadilla UAP video. But I believe it was 2001, first time someone ever actually wrote down that they think and published a paper saying they think UAPs may be bending light or might bend light.
So to go a little further, we're going to show you some historical pictures that show the same thing before computers, before CGI graphics. And nobody even knew, even a few years ago, they didn't look for this. So they didn't know to put it in when they were faking a UFO. So I have seen thousands of cases through MUFON Canada and other, and I can tell right away if they're fake or not. So your answer to your question is this proof that it's a real UFO or UAP? The answer is yes. This is a very distinctive signature.
All right, so the next one actually is, we wanted to go over how several skeptics have said that the Aguadilla might be a balloon or might be a sky lantern. Well, when you look at it, when you look at it and you think, well, it could look like a balloon, but if you don't know what a balloon looks like to an IR camera, you won't have any idea. Image A is a latex balloon circled in red and a mylar balloon circled in blue. B and C, you can see the red circled latex balloon is almost perfectly transparent. It looks like a soap bubble. And that's with the camera only feet away from it. At a distance, you wouldn't even be able to see a latex balloon. Now, the other one circled in blue, and then again on the right in D and E is a mylar balloon, which actually turns out to be a perfect mirror, a perfect near circular mirror for an IR light. And the way that an IR camera would see it, if looking from above, as is the case with the Aguadilla, D shows what a visible light of this happy birthday mylar balloon, but E, the bottom right, shows it's reflecting the cold sky from above. If that Aguadilla video was of a mylar balloon, it would have been a perfect white object and not a dark black object. It's the opposite color of what a mylar balloon should look like. Next image is 2 screen captures from a video created by Dave Palachik. He's another IR camera specialist. That's all he's been doing professionally for the government for his entire career. He had someone in a helicopter fly over a residential area, and he released a latex balloon, and you can't see it unless he points it out, which you can see in image B in the lower left as it's passing in front of a car that is white. There's no way that the Aguadilla could have been either a latex balloon or a mylar balloon, because you either wouldn't have been able to see it at that distance, or it's the wrong color. A sky lantern, which Dave Palachik also filmed with an IR camera. This is the only image I could find of what a sky lantern looks like through an IR lens. Now, it's dark black, just like the Aguadilla, so I could see some skeptics going, okay, great, it's a sky lantern, but there's a hitch. In the video, what we identified, and I've blown it up here, is as the UAP passes in front of dark background objects, there's this really bright white formation above the UAP. And lower right, C, I have done a color change to emphasize what we're seeing. Red is hot, being black, and white is now shown as blue, being cold. So there's a very cold object shown above every time it passes in front of something that's darker, which means that a sky lantern cannot produce a cold object around itself. So whatever the UAP was, it was not a sky lantern, which means that when the skeptics, including AARO, went and stated that we think it's a balloon or a sky lantern in parallax, that was their best guess, but it's not a balloon and it's not a sky lantern, because all 3 cases do not match what was captured in the video.
When Koslowski gave that explanation just a few months ago, I know it went under a lot of people's skin trying to explain away the Aguadilla incident as parallax and providing almost no data to back that up. When you guys saw that presentation and the paperwork that came out for it, what was going through your minds during that time, knowing what you know now and what you're presenting to us here today?
That's a very good question. We had published a 2-part paper on gravitational lensing, specifically about the Aguadilla video in the MUFON journal. And that was 2 parts, was July and August. And then we started hearing in September rumors on AARO was looking into the Aguadilla and that it might be parallax. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, we triggered them. And so when it came out in November, I'm like, I think our article got under their skin and they reacted to it and they said, quick, we've got to explain this away. That was my thinking. That was my reaction.
And I had a very simple, very fast thought that came through my head the minute I listened to that. And it was swamp gas and weather balloons.
The today drones, right?
It was so pat of an answer. And you're right, Christina, no evidence whatsoever, no justification. And he was like, do your presentation, and that's it. We're all out of here. There was no questions. There was no nothing. There was nobody else in the room. So swamp gas and weather balloons.
So the last part to that I'll say is what I noticed was he didn't do it under oath. There was no swearing of an oath. So he was free to misrepresent if he so chose. Which brings up the next slide. I believe what they did was, at very best, confirmation biased. And basically, this is a nice description from Britannica, but the part I'd like to highlight here is people are especially likely to process information to support their own beliefs when an issue is highly important or self-relevant. People will ignore things that are uncomfortable for them and ignore evidence, and their bias overrides the facts. I was asked recently about confirmation bias and could I be suffering from confirmation bias? And so I did a little study. I asked ChatGPT to do a review of all the published data on UAP for both skeptics and researchers and trying to determine if either side is suffering from confirmation bias. And the answer was affirmative yes. I asked it to compare skeptics versus researchers, and both sides unfortunately do fall for bias. It seems that the skeptics, the real hardcore, very public ones, it's their period and story every single case. In the case of the UAP researchers, some of us do get overly enthusiastic about our pet discoveries and cling on to them far too long when evidence comes up to prove otherwise. So both sides suffer from bias, unfortunately, but we need to be able to learn how to put that aside and evaluate using proper scientific evaluation methodologies.
Well, do you have any advice on ways to combat confirmation bias for both believers and skeptics from your own personal experiences and your own research?
Yeah, I do. When I first started doing this research on gravitational lensing, I discovered a video. It was supposedly taken from the cockpit of a fighter jet, and it showed a UAP flying by, and there was some things going on around the object. And it turned out, and I'd done a presentation on it, and I was pretty convinced it was gravitational lensing, but I finally was able to track down the original source of the footage, which was all over YouTube, and it was put up on TikTok by a guy who does videos from Flight Simulator. And it turned out it was an add-on to a flight simulator package. And that's what it was. And I'm like, okay, this is not a UAP. This is a flight simulator modified for the fun of it. And someone put it up and right in his thing said that this was taken from Flight Simulator. But others were like, oh, no, this can't be a flight simulator. It's too real looking. And it's splattered all over YouTube now. And I'll admit I fell for it for a couple of months. But when I found the original and confirmed that it was CGI, or no, I wouldn't call it CGI. I would call it a gaming engine thing. There was one thing I did discover through my work with this is if you run your imagery through a gaming engine, the gaming engines don't use ray tracing. They use a just-in-time rendering, which can distort background objects. So unfortunately, there is a possibility that if it's run through one of these game renders, an object will look like it's distorting background objects. So going on to the next slide, I wanted to highlight this very cold object that was above the Aguadilla UAP. And it's what we call a vapor cone. Now, I've blown it up here to show it, but A, B, and C on the left are almost frame by frame. I believe there's a few frames between each one of these. And to show that white object is deforming over time as it's moving along. And this white cloud can be either to the left of, directly above, or to the right of the UAP. It all depends on the speed of the UAP, any wind, and the angle of the camera as well. So what is this vapor cloud and how is it forming? So with the Alcubierre formula, space above the craft and slightly left in this case, so it's counteracting Earth's gravity and a slight angle to create a forward motion. That contraction above the UAP is creating a compressed bit of space, but as it's moving through the air, there's a pocket of air there that is, the way I'll describe it is, as 1 cubic foot of air suddenly finds itself inside a compressed space, that compressed space actually is relative. It's maybe 10 cubic feet of space. So that air is suddenly finding itself in a much larger pocket of space, and it's going to expand, and it's going to expand very rapidly. When that happens, it's something called adiabatic cooling. And so this adiabatic cooling is how our air conditioners work. Jet aircraft also have a vapor cone, and they create a shock wave, and that shock wave is a decompressed zone, which is also causes the adiabatic cooling effect. And so if there's enough vapor in the air, and the temperature drop is high enough, that vapor will condense into droplets and forming a temporary visible cone. In the case of a jet aircraft, it's going to be on the back end of the aircraft as it's traveling between 0.8 and 1.2 Mach. In the case of a UAP, I've noted it's in speeds as low as 100 miles an hour, and another video which you'll see shortly that is a much higher speed. And then Skywatcher, when they put out their second video, Mr. Barber's group, they identified and put some images in their second video identifying there appears to be some kind of cloud or vapor around it. We were talking earlier about gravitational lensing causing the distortion of what a UAP would look like. So Rex Heflin took some photos, I believe it was 1968. He took 4 photographs. You can see in A blow-up shows that the UAP is slightly blurred, or sorry, C is slightly blurred, but lower left, B is, there's a double overlap, and I'll talk about that in a sec. And then D on the right shows a smoke ring that was left behind as it rapidly departed. So we don't know where exactly it went. It might even be, there's a little dot here in the corner, left-hand corner, that might even be it as it's rapidly departing. Theoretically, we believe this smoke ring was actually a vapor cone left behind as it rapidly departed.
While we're actually talking about this, because Rex took some fantastic photos, maybe some of the best during that time, but over the decades, we have seen different photographs of different shaped craft. Do you think these UAP shapes, like discs and triangles and spheres and all the other ones, do you think they suggest varied propulsion mechanisms, or are they just different applications of the same fundamental technology?
Different applications of the same fundamental technology. So for example, the Tic Tac, you'd have 2 warp drives instead of 1. In the case of a triangle, you'd have 3 or more. In the case of a boomerang, you might have 5 or more. And so you can actually create these different shapes. It's like helicopter craft that we manufacture. The smaller helicopters have a single blade above and a small tail rotor. But when you get into the large helicopters that are transporting cargo or large numbers of people, they've got 2 helicopter blades, and they're much longer and they're more cylindrical in shape. So size dictates function, dictates the number of warp nacelles you have in it. This was posted on TikTok. There's no name to this particular video, but it shows a large disc approaching an aircraft, then disappears very rapidly. So I've gone and stabilized it. It lasts 11 seconds. Left stabilizes left, original is right. What I noticed when I broke it down is the craft is actually moving slightly left and right, and it's also slightly dipping up and down as it's moving. There's a few very clear instances of background spatial warping, background gravitational lensing happening here. The spatial deformation is much less above than it is below. And then right here, it's really interesting. Watch this little piece here, right there. That thing bends and moves quite a bit. And then there's another one here. I've moved forward. So there's the link for everybody. They can see the full 5-minute video. That's how long it took to do this full examination. This is a manual stabilization that I did to show just what's going on with the background objects as the UAP is passing in front of these particular objects. You can see on the right over here, There's some changing here, and then as well in the lower left. Now, as it's, and this is another example where it's passing in front of a background feature, and you can see the background feature becoming momentarily blurred as it passes in front. And this one is the most interesting part. As it rapidly departs, you can see there's this white cloud in the last 2 frames forming in front of it as it leaves. So what is that white cloud? On the left is I took my original Excel spreadsheet spatial deformation, and I applied a compression algorithm to it, to color coding it to show parts of the space where there's expansion up to 2.5 times and contraction down to less than 1%. And so this pink and magenta coloration of the highest point of spatial contraction in front of the UAP, assuming it's traveling horizontally, you can see that same shape. It's a 1-to-1 correlation. Let's suppose that someone did create this as a CGI and they knew they had to warp the background, or they used a video game render which accidentally warped the background. The difference here is this vapor cloud forming in front of the UAP as it disappeared. It's not a lens flare, because you can see the lens flares on the left and right of this object. This is not touching it, it's in front of it as it's rapidly departing. Nobody knew until the publication of my book that they were supposed to add in a white cloud in front of it as it rapidly it retreats away from the aircraft.
That's really interesting. Have you seen similar anomalies with other UFO videos, a little cloud showing up?
We've seen it in 3, the Aguadilla, the Skywatcher, and this one.
And I'm going over thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of hours of video that we've shot around the world of UAPs when we're out doing sky watches to see if we missed this little thing, because we didn't know to look for it. And we have some UAPs that literally disappeared just like this one right in front of our eyes. And we've caught quite a few of them on video. So we have thousands of hours to go through. We got to pull out the archives. And that's the other reason I've asked Chad to join us in our group, CISA. And we can talk more about that later if we have time. But anyways, we're going to start reviewing all these. And then we're going to be putting them up on our website. It's not up yet, but cssaa.org will be up. And we're going to start sharing this all publicly. And we've got people around the world who are also contributing their UAP videos that they've shot. There's quite a lot of people who go out and do sky watching, but there's only a few that have incredible instruments and capability of actually capturing these things. We have all that, and it's unbelievable how much we travel. When we go on an airplane to go somewhere, we are probably taking 300 pounds of equipment. It gets costly because we got to put it all in baggage.